All righty. So we're going to go ahead and get started now. Let me go ahead and pull up the presentation. I'm pretty sure everybody can see it at this point. And someone let me know if you can't, but I'm pretty sure everybody can. Let me go ahead and get this bad boy going here. Sweet. Are you guys seeing the presentation in full screen? Sweeter. All right, thanks everybody for coming. So this is, again, like I said before, this is kind of the latest edition of kind of the exercise science colloquium series that we've been doing. And I'm Dr. Sean Stickney, a science tutor here at Purdue Global, also a professor down at Georgia State in the Atlanta area. And my specialty, well, I have a lot of them, but it's exercise science generally, and then public health. But I want to welcome you guys again to the presentation. This is, again, part 3 in what will ultimately be probably a 10 to 15 part series. And my vision for this series is to address different issues relative to sport and exercise participation. And the idea here is I wanted to address issues ranging from kind of the psychology of sport and exercise to the kind of the biomechanics of it. So the idea with this presentation is that we were going to build on past presentations. And from what I understand, these presentations were in fact recorded and are available for you guys. And the idea was to take people along with me on this journey and start from presentation 1 and then go through probably the sport and exercise nutrition component of this, which will be kind of upcoming over the holidays, probably a little bit after that particular point in time. But anyway, this particular presentation, what I'm doing is I'm kind of going back to my roots as an athlete, and I'm talking quite extensively about strength training. And just so you guys can kind of understand the roadmap that I'm trying to follow on this presentation right here is going to be talking kind of about the concepts involved with it, some of the terminology associated with it, and some of the science associated with strength training. Later on in this series, I'm going to kind of put all these together in terms of what is called exercise prescription and exercise program design. So there is kind of a payoff if you listen to these and you watch these presentations and webinars. They kind of build on each other. And ultimately, when I cover all the science-y kind of stuff, then what we're going to do is we're going to tackle a presentation where we're going to help people interested design aerobic or an anaerobic training program utilizing all the stuff that we talked about previously. Without that, let me just go ahead and just get started with the presentation. And so I always kind of label this setting the stage. And what I like to know from people is, have they strength trained? Do they strength train? Is this something that you've done regularly and something that you have some experience with? Just a little quick aside about me. I played some college football at UCLA back in the day, and it was very much part of the sporting culture in Los Angeles to engage in periodized strength training. But then I kind of made the mistake early on of getting involved in amateur bodybuilding and kind of strutting around the stage in my mankini. And that became kind of a way that I lived my life. And so this very much is something that speaks to my heart as a strength training athlete. And it's something that I hope I can share with you over the course of the next 30 to 45 minutes. But as I think about myself and I think about why I started strength training these 30 years ago, I started for pretty much what we would call extrinsic reasons, right? Extrinsic, EX for extrinsic, EX for external. So I sought external validation for my strength training. I wanted attention. I wanted praise. I wanted to make the starting lineup. I wanted to get some more playing time. I started for extrinsic reasons. I started for reasons that were kind of placed outside of me, but then kind of a funny thing happened. And that funny thing was, as I did it more for reasons that lied outside of me, I started taking kind of an internal interest in it. And then I started kind of lighting that fuse in my soul and the passions for strength training. So at that point on in my early 20s, I kind of became a science nerd, and I wanted to figure out how the body responded to training. I wanted to figure out how muscles responded to training. I wanted to figure out how I could become a better athlete. So that kind of led me down this path in terms of my own training. I'm assuming that maybe you all have different kinds of reasons for this if you do it. It's been studied in so many ways, from weight loss and fat loss to just self-esteem enhancement and different situations like that. So presentation objectives. The idea here is that I want to hit up about 4 different things. So I want to talk about the benefits of it, but I don't really want to belabor that so much because you can go to Dr. Google and you can kind of figure that out. All right, there's a lot of benefits to regular strength training, and I don't think I need to take up a lot of your precious time to tell you about the 30 or 40 or 50 benefits of that. I will highlight a couple different ones. And then down here to the second bullet, I'm just going to kind of get into some basic principles of why strength training works, right? I mean, strength training doesn't work just because all of a sudden your muscles get magically swole, right? It's not so much about that. There's some biochemistry to it, there's some physiology to it, and there's some biomechanics to it. And there's certain principles that I think an intelligent strength trainer should be aware of. So that's kind of my charge there, is to talk about some of those principles. And then I want to talk really quickly about some basic terminology. So in the classes that I teach down here in the Georgia area, I have a lot of students that have kind of filtered through my revolving door of education. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is when I have this effect on students and they leave my class and they start using basic terminology as part of their everyday language, right? As athletes. I really like that because it shows me that they actually learned and incorporated this material into their sense of who they are, right, as athletes or as students. And so I would like you all to just become aware, if you're not already, with some of this basic terminology associated with strength training. And then I'm going to talk about just really quickly some sample strength training routines and some sample exercises. But as I said, kind of at the beginning of this presentation, this isn't so much of an exercise prescription moment here in time. This is more of an education moment. And so if this is something that you're kind of vibing with and something that you're kind of following along with and it kind of strikes you in more of an intrinsic way, then I would encourage you to kind of stick with some of these presentations that we're doing every month. Ultimately, we get to an exercise prescription presentation and we kind of help each other design an effective program. And it could be in strength training. It could be a combination of strength and aerobic training. So I just want to kind of present a couple moments in a vacuum here of how you can go about doing that. All right, so this particular slide here talks about the main benefits of strength training, and I don't necessarily need to belabor the first point there. Yeah, most of us in here have a pretty intuitive idea that it does make you stronger, and as you become stronger, it makes performing your daily tasks much easier. All right, I'm a professor that likes to tell stories to my students in classrooms, and so I hope I don't bother you with a couple stories tonight, but here's one that my wife and I, who is also a professor, we've dealt with the last couple days. We went camping over the weekend, and we have this little thing called a teardrop camper. It's a small little camper, weighs about 2,000 pounds. And the idea here is we came back from our camping trip, but when I was backing the camper down the driveway, I noticed that it started kind of rolling into a tree. And my car doesn't have the muscle to take this camper and pull it back up this inclined driveway and straighten it back out so I can then back down into the garage. So I had to kind of drop the camper off the car because my car was literally spinning its wheels. And then my wife and I, just the two of us, trying to put our professor brains together, and we're trying to figure out how are we going to get this camper down to where it's supposed to go, which is about 20 feet away, but it's all downhill. All right. We both strength train quite a bit. We have our own gym downstairs, and we both have been athletes, and we've done so for a lot of years. So we're trying to take this 2,000-pound camper with gravity down a declinated driveway without running into our garage or smacking ourselves between the camper and the garage. And that took all the strength and all the endurance muscle-wise that we had as a couple to have her in the front of the camper and then me basically doing an isometric squat at the back of the camper to prevent it from rolling down into the garage very quickly. And we kind of got ourselves beaten up by it. But we were both sitting there the next night, and we were so glad that we had spent pretty much a lifetime of strength training. Because if we hadn't done that, if we hadn't made ourselves stronger over the years, then I doubt we would have been able to control that kind of weight with the momentum of gravity. Okay, so that's like kind of a real world embarrassing application, performing daily tasks much easier. And yeah, we got some welts and we ran over our toes and all sorts of stuff. But at the end of the day, we were all pretty impressed that we had the strength to take this camper and put it where it needed to go without the assistance of my car. Strength training also helps your heart health. And a lot of people say, really, heart health? Okay, how does that happen? Well, it happens that it helps lower blood pressure. and it helps your ventricles of your heart distend a little more, stretch a little more, and allow more blood into it, therefore more blood to pump in a given particular activity. So there is heart health benefits as well. It also helps managing your blood sugar levels. And then, of course, it promotes flexibility and mobility, or just kind of moving body through time and space. And then the last thing that we have started to see probably in the last 10 or 15 years is strength training is an excellent way to lose body fat. And it used to be in the old school days that, oh, I needed to combine strength training with aerobic training, and then the combination of the two would lend itself to fat loss. Well, current physiologic research has indicated, yeah, that strength training by itself is a great way to lose body fat. And the old school athletes really didn't think that way, but the new science has told us that. So there's a lot of benefits from strength training. And these are just the physical benefits, right? There's a lot of psychological benefits to it as well. And it's not just kind of walking around and kind of like a peacock and feeling good about yourself and how you're filling out your shirts and your shorts. It's not so much about that. It's more about kind of the transference of your sense of accomplishment into your daily routine. And so the two things I wanted to highlight here was that strength training does build self-esteem. Because generally, if you do this the right way, you establish certain goals and you establish certain steps that as an athlete, you're trying to achieve. And then every time you achieve those goals, oh, I want to bench press a little bit more here. I want to lose this much body weight here. I want to work out this number of days here. So when you accomplish these goals, certainly your self-esteem is going to improve, and that will transfer to other dimensions of your life. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight here in terms of the psychological benefits of strength training is it does something called increase your self-efficacy. So here, it's all about the belief in your ability to perform certain tasks. And so it's related to self-esteem, but self-esteem is more about the feelings that you get about yourself as a result of it. Self-efficacy is more about your beliefs in your ability to do something. I wanted to just kind of highlight those two features, psychological features of strength training. So basically, there's a bunch. If you look back at the previous slide, we talked about some of those things here, and this is kind of accepted science behind strength training and its benefits. But there's just a lot of psychological benefits too that I just kind of wanted you guys to kind of wrap your head around and hear me talk about. Now let's talk just really quickly about how strength training works. So it's more than just, okay, I want to lift weights and I want to eat right. And if I can do the combination of those two things, then magically I'm going to have muscles popping out and shaping themselves in places I never had before. So we have to kind of go into the science a little bit. And that's what this presentation again is about. We're kind of covering the science of strength training from a kind of an overview kind of perspective, right? We got our drone up over the field of strength training and we're kind of looking down at it. And then, like I said, later on in our presentations, I'll get to, okay, now you're interested in doing strength training. What does that look like? Just so everybody can kind of understand the roadmap here. So these three principles right here are some of the most basic principles of how strength training works. The first one we call specificity. Okay, and what specificity is, something is specific to something else. So specificity is all about changing your body and forcing your body to adapt to the stress that you put on it through strength training. With strength training, you are stressing your muscles big time, depending on how you do it. Okay, depends on the muscles that you train. Are you training your upper body muscles? Are you training your lower body muscles? But you are in fact stressing your muscles. Then your body says, ooh, that didn't feel so good. You're breaking apart the different fibers that constitute a muscle. I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rebuild those fibers. I'm going to adapt to the pressure and the stress that you put on those fibers. And then that process of adaptation is what we call specificity. A lot of people just kind of think that you lift and you get bigger. And it is not quite that simple. The idea is you lift, and depending upon how you strength train, you are actually breaking apart muscle fibers. You're actually microscopically damaging them. But then on the flip side of that is if you have proper recovery, proper diet, and you're getting adequate sleep and a few other things have to fall into play, then magically what happens is those fibers rebuild themselves, but they come back thicker, they come back stronger. So I wanted you to see that particular principle of specificity. So depending upon the muscles that you train, there are physiologic adaptations that your muscles go through as a result of being broken down by strength training. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. The next one is called overload. So the idea here is that you are constantly changing the amount of stimulus or stress that you put on your muscles. And if you don't do that, your muscles don't grow. So if I'm breaking apart my muscles with a certain level of stimulus, let's call it 50 pounds of pushing some kind of weight, my muscles will become adaptable and they will become used to that 50 pounds. They're going to become used to that level of stress, that level of stimulus. And they're going to start responding to that, and they're not going to really exert themselves too much. They're going to be able to just kind of metabolically contract the way that they need to meet that demand. So strength training is all about saying to your muscles, no, 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 no. We're not going to let you get used to a specific stimulus. We're going to increase that over time. Therefore, your muscles don't really get a chance to kind of get used to a certain level of intensity. So in terms of this, I'm talking about the amount of weight you lift. And I'll talk about some of these terms like volume later on. But there's different things that you can change relative to strength training where you're giving your body no chance to adapt. You're constantly changing the stimulus that you're putting on your muscles. That's how your muscles grow. They grow through adaptation in that they kind of get microscopically torn, but they rebuild themselves bigger and stronger. But at a point in time, they need more stimulation to achieve the same basic result. Okay, so that's called overload. And then the last one is called progression or periodization. I talked about periodization in my last presentation, but basically with this kind of principle of progression, what you have to do is you have to slowly progress over time and overload over time, but not too much. If you overload too much, you get things like burnout, psychologically or physically. You get connective tissue injury or you get muscular injury. So the idea with progression and periodization is that you intelligently put together a program that is based on overload, but intelligent overload, where you give yourself a chance to maximize your performance and avoid poor injury and poor technique by putting together in a certain kind of way. Let's move on to the last two. There's two more principles I wanted to go ahead and highlight. One is called the law of diminishing returns, or what we call adaptation. And that's what I was trying to talk about before. Our bodies get adapted to a certain stimulus. And as they adapt, they will only expend so much energy to meet that stimulus. But in strength training and improving our muscle strength and our muscle endurance, what we have to do is we have to not really let our muscles adapt to a certain stimulus. But there is a condition, there is a principle where your training determines how many improvements that you see over a period of time. And the law of diminishing return is also kind of known among bodybuilders and meatheads, so to speak, as the law of just do as much as you have to do, but no more. So the idea here is with diminishing returns, if you start strength training, if there's someone out here who says, you know what, I've heard of strength training, I've seen it before, I tried it during a New Year's resolution once, but then yuck, it kind of started to feel bad, and I got sore the next morning, and I couldn't get into my clothes, and it was just kind of an aversive situation to me. I wasn't vibing with it, I wasn't quite feeling it, so you kind of maybe let it go. But science tells us that as we start an exercise program and we stick with it, we're going to see more outcomes and more performance improvements at the beginning of our training than someone who's an advanced athlete. Their performance improvements are going to be relatively smaller. They've done it for longer, and the gains that they make are going to be slower than someone who just started. And that kind of makes sense, right? I mean, muscles have a certain genetic limit unless we introduce things like steroids into the mix. There's a certain limit of where muscles can go in terms of strength and size, hypertrophy. So if we kind of achieve higher levels of strength and hypertrophy, then all of a sudden, there's just our window is getting pretty dang close to being closed. So our performance improvements are going to be fairly small because we've already gotten so much from our body earlier on in our career. But if we're just starting out down here, then we have a lot more room to grow and a lot more room to improve. So that's the law of diminishing returns. Basically, what it says is that we adapt, and if we just start, there's more room for improvement. But as we become more advanced, our improvements are a little smaller, if that makes sense to you. The last one is called reversibility. All right, and that's the use it or lose it paradigm, the use it or lose it principle. And in strength training, it's something that we see a lot, where the effects that we have fought for and that we had sweat for and that we have eaten for and we have pushed and pulled for, those different benefits will go away very quickly if we don't train for an extended period of time. And the lack of training could be due to injury. It could be due to disease. It could be due to differences in your schedules and how much time you have to do it. So basically with reversibility, it's all about, I've made some gains. I've improved my muscle strength, my muscle power, my muscle endurance. But if I don't train at a particular threshold or a particular capacity, then all of a sudden my muscles will reverse all that I've done, and I will lose the training benefits that I have fought for so long to achieve. So let's go ahead and take another flyby here. The principle of specificity just basically means that the way that your muscles adapt is going to be dependent upon how you train them and how much you demand from your muscles, and break them down and allow them to get bigger, reconnect. Overload basically means that in order to get the benefits that we want from strength training, we have to continuously seek greater levels of stimuli to change and to challenge our muscles. Progression and periodization is, how do we do that? How do we maximize our performance? How do we overload our muscles intelligently? And so we can progress intelligently over time and not burn ourselves out. The last two, laws of diminishing return, that's just about what kind of performance improvements we can expect as we are a novice or beginning strength trainer up to an advanced or bodybuilding kind of competitive strength trainer. We have different levels of expectations in terms of the returns that we can see from our muscles. And then reversibility, most people remember this by the use it or lose it paradigm. So you train, you make gains. You don't train, you start losing some of those gains. So really quickly, just because I don't like to just walk the walk. I tell this to my students all the time. Don't just seek to walk the walk, seek to talk the talk. So the idea is, okay, how do we talk the talk relative to strength training? Well, there's a few different terms I want everybody here to understand if you're still with me. 3 of those terms involve how muscles shorten or how they get stressed and how they contract. Muscles are designed to get shorter and contract. And when muscles contract or kind of squeeze together at a certain anatomical point, then that's called a specific type of contraction, and that produces human skeletal movement. But there's different ways that muscle units get shorter. One way they get shorter is through isometric muscle contraction. And with isometrics, what you're doing is, imagine that you're kind of standing up against a wall and you put your hands on a wall and you're trying to push the wall away from you. So basically you're trying to push the wall away from you, but guess what? The wall ain't moving. Your muscles are still contracting, but your muscle fibers are not getting shorter and sliding past each other because there's no muscle movement. Or I can take my hands and I can push them together just like I'm doing right now. So I have all sorts of contraction going on in my arms right now, but my muscle fibers in my biceps and triceps and deltoids are not getting shorter because there's no movement. So that's called an isometric contraction. There's no change in my muscle fibers. And how I teach this to my students is I say, look at the O and look at the M in isometric. Isometric, O-M. And I always tell my students, I'm very big into helping them remember things. And so I say the O stands for no, 0, no. M stands for movement, no movement. So with an isometric muscle contraction, there is no movement in the muscle fiber. Okay, isotonic. That's kind of the stuff that we know of kind of classically, where the muscle fibers slide past each other. That's called sliding filament theory. And we're not turning this into an exercise science class or a physiology class. But basically what happens is when these muscle fibers slide past each other, the muscle itself shortens. So there are 2 types of isotonic contractions, where the muscles shorten and where they lengthen. And so concentric muscle contractions is when the muscle fibers actually slide past each other like my fingers are right now, and the muscle gets shorter. So if you can see my thumbs, here my thumbs are further apart. But as I concentrically contract and my muscle fibers, which are my fingers, are sliding past each other, look what happens to my thumbs. My thumbs get closer together. So that's a contracting muscle fiber. So concentric muscle fiber is more about the muscle fibers shortening through contracting the muscle fibers. Eccentric muscle fibers is the exact opposite. Here, the muscle is lengthening. So look at my hands again. So here, the muscle fibers are kind of interconnected where my fingers are. My muscle is fully contracted, right? I'm doing that bicep curl. So now with eccentric contraction, the muscle's starting to slide further and further apart. Okay, my thumbs are getting further and further apart. That's called an eccentric muscle contraction. They are both forms of isotonic. Concentric, they get shorter. Eccentric, they get longer. Now, the problem with sports injuries is sometimes your eccentric contractions get too long, and guess what? You get a rupture. The muscle fibers become disconnected. And so you have a complete muscular strain, a type 3 strain, it turns out to be, and that's called a complete rupture of the muscle fiber. So both concentric and eccentric are types of isotonic muscle contractions. The last one, real quickly, is called isokinetic. And so if you've been into a physical therapist's office, or maybe you've been into an exercise physiology laboratory at a college or a university, they have these nice fancy machines that they sit people down at. And there's a lot of programming to them. There's a lot of computer technology associated with them. And so what happens is, depending upon the muscle group that needs to be trained, you will assist computer programming, and it will have a very stringent level of speed and intensity with which the machine will allow you to progress. With isotonic contraction, you can control the speed that you concentrically and eccentrically can contract. You can go fast or you can go slow, okay, depending upon how you want to lift. But with isokinetic, the machine does that for you. The machine will dictate how fast and how consistent your speed can be. They don't want people re-injuring their knees or their ankles or whatever. So the machines that they're going to use are going to have a constant speed and a constant intensity of how they allow your muscle fibers to stretch, if that makes sense. So those three different types of contractions: isometric, no movement. You're pushing against the wall. The wall ain't going anywhere, and neither are you. Isotonic, that's the classical type of conditioning. What you're getting here is muscle fibers sliding past each other. So your muscle fibers are shortening, your muscle is shortening, thumbs, or eccentric, lengthening. And then isokinetic is more about physical therapy or some kind of machine with computer tech in it, which is causing a constant change of speed and intensity. Okay, if you guys are with me to that point. Again, we're kind of nerding out here. And the idea is I would like people to understand who are interested in this, and I'm assuming you all are, to kind of understand kind of the pool that we're swimming in. So we have to understand some of the terminology. Okay, volume. If I talk about the volume of strength training, I'm talking about how much strength training I'm actually doing, but not just how much. I'm talking about looking at and quantifying, measuring how many reps and how many sets I've done in a particular workout. So the idea here is, how much weight am I lifting? So I'm going to talk about this concept of sets and reps. Some people kind of know the word sets and reps, so I don't mean to insult anybody's intelligence right now. But again, we'll nerd out on those two concepts as well. But the idea is, we are going to look at our sets and our reps and the amount of weight that we're lifting, and we're going to do some fancy math where we're going to multiply our sets times our reps times our weight, and then we're going to add everything all up. I used to do this in my journal back in the day. And then that's going to be an indicator of our volume. So basically, volume is how much am I lifting? How much weight am I putting upon my body in that one particular workout? And how we measure that is we look at the amount of sets we're doing, we multiply it by the amount of reps we're doing, and then we're going to go ahead and figure in the weight along the way. So the next one is intensity. And that's all about basically how heavy the actual weight is. And the way that we measure this in a physiology lab is we have something we call a 1 rep max. And that's what you have down there in that last bullet point. So the idea is, I want to find out how strong, how powerful a particular muscle group is, whether it's a bicep or whether it's a pectoral, or whether it's a quadricep muscle. So one of the things that we can do in a controlled setting is we can test our students or our athletes and say, what is your 1 rep max? Okay. And the idea is, how much weight can you lift one time? If you try your absolute hardest and you push with all your might, how much weight are you doing? How heavy is that weight? Then what we're going to do as we start to develop our own exercise program and strength training is we're not going to always lift all that maximum amount, because then we probably kill ourselves. So the idea is we're going to lift a certain percentage of that, a certain percentage of our 1 repetition max. So as the weight actually increases, it becomes more intense. So the idea here is muscle intensity is all about the associations with your 1 rep max, but basically it's the heavier the weight, the more intense your lift is. And so what I used to do is I used to test all my muscle groups back in the day, and I used to look at my 1 repetition max. And then I would design my program. Oh, this month I'm going to work out at 85% of my 1 repetition max for my chest. Next month, I might work out at 60% of my 1 repetition max. And that starts to kind of form the basis for periodization, because you never want to do the same thing over time, right? That leads to stagnation. So the idea is you want to change things. You want to change your volume. You want to change how much weight you lift. Sometimes you want to lift less. Sometimes you want to lift more. Never let your body adapt, right? That's the principle of progression. Then you also want to do the same thing with intensity. So in terms of how heavy are you lifting? Sometimes you want to lift closer to your 1 repetition max if you're training for like muscle power. But then other times, if you're training for muscle endurance, you want to work out at a lower percentage of your 1 RM. 1 RM means 1 repetition max. Okay, so there's a couple words right there, a couple more. This is just a slide real quick. I thought maybe you had this a couple slides up. It's kind of a visualization of the types of muscle contractions. So the idea here is, this is just kind of a visual to show you what a concentric contraction is versus eccentric, right? They're both forms of isotonic. And then over here, that's the isometric, all right? So the idea here is someone's holding a weight, but they're not actually moving the weight, if you can see that picture. So that would be called an isometric, no movement muscle contraction. The biceps muscle is not moving. You're just holding a weight still, no movement there. And then over here on the other side, if you're curling these weights, as your muscle gets shorter and the weight gets closer to your head, that's called a concentric contraction. But as you return to your normal starting position, that is called an eccentric muscle contraction. So that's just a little visualization for you. A couple more terms, if you guys are with me. I'm hoping that many of you guys are kind of getting into this a little bit, kind of nerding out with me, kind of geeking out with me a little bit here. So talked a little bit about the concepts of how strength training works, talking about some of the terminology of what we kind of wrap our heads around as strength trainers. So the first 2 are the basic ones. What's a set? What's a rep? Okay. A set basically is a group of repetitions. Okay, well, that's cool, Dr. Sean, but what's a repetition? A repetition is a single time that you lift a weight. The single time, let's say, here's my finger. I'm doing a kind of a flexion of this finger right here. If this is my starting position and I do 1 flexion of the muscles right here on the medial side, this is 1 repetition. I did it 1 time. So the number of times that you perform a muscular action is called a repetition. So this is going to be 1 rep. Oh, okay, rest. 2 reps. Oh, okay, rest. 3 reps. Oh, okay, rest. A repetition is basically how many times you lift and lower a weight from a starting point. Okay, so if I lift, let's say, a weight 5 times, that's 5 reps. If I take this finger right here and I do this 5 times, that's 5 repetitions for this particular muscle group right here, which causes this biomechanical action. So rep is basically how many times are you doing a muscle movement. So that's your reps. Your sets are groupings of reps. For every set, you do X number of reps. So let's say I want to do 3 repetitions of this movement right here. And I want to do 3 repetitions 3 times. So here's 1, 2, 3. That's 1 set. Then I take my rest. Okay, I had 3 repetitions in 1 set. Take my rest. I want to do 3 more times. 1, 2, 3. That's my second set. Taking my rest. Checking my Instagram feed. All right, now here's my third set. 1, 2, 3. So what I just did was 3 sets of 3 reps, if that makes sense to you guys. So the idea is with weight training, we want to design a program where we have X number of reps, X number of sets with rest in between. And then we structure those along with some other principles I've already talked about to help whatever physiologic change we want from our muscles. Do we want more muscle power? Do we want more muscle speed? Do we want more muscle size? Or do we want more muscle endurance? How we can structure our sets and our reps and our volume and our intensity, we can train for certain things. One repetition maximum, I've already kind of covered that. One repetition max is just the total amount of weight that you can lift for a given exercise one time. Why do we care about that? Because that's where we're kind of referring to relative to our intensity. Muscle failure is the point where our muscles become so fatigued that we can't do another one. So if I'm doing an overhead press, right, and I'm working my deltoid muscles, I can get to a point where I've done it enough or I've used enough heavy weight where I can't get one more repetition from that. I get to this point right here and I have to return. I can't complete this movement. So because I can't go any higher than this, my deltoid muscle has gone to failure. So the muscles are so fatigued that I can't finish my repetition. So that's muscle failure. And so what a lot of strength training athletes do is they train to muscle failure, not beyond muscle failure, because if you do that, you risk injury. The last one is called delayed onset of muscle soreness, or we call DOMS. And this is going to be one of the reasons that New Year's resolution people don't stick with new strength training programs, is because they start to feel sore the next day or the next day after. And they're like, oh man, this doesn't feel so good. I don't want to make my body feel this way because everything just kind of hurts to move, like my wife and I did the day after we tried to battle our camper. So the idea here is we very much had delayed onset muscle soreness. We had an adrenaline rush and we had some hormones and some neurotransmitters coursing around in our body because we're trying to not to kill our camper and damage it and get it back to where it's supposed to go. But then we were all kind of geeked up for that. But then the next day when we kind of came back down to our normal level, all of a sudden, ooh, these muscles that we never knew we had are now sore because they become inflamed with all the energy and all the activity that we were demanding to kind of get this camper where it needs to go. So delayed onset of muscle soreness is brought about by microscopic tearing of the fibers when they're sliding in and out of each other. And also when they kind of slide back and forth past each other, they get inflamed by the friction. So that inflammation also lends itself to muscle soreness. The last part of this I kind of want to get to before I start talking about specific things is just a few more kind of advanced concepts and terminology associated with this. Again, I'm very much a believer of talking the talk. So circuit training, some of you guys have heard about this. What circuit training is you perform back-to-back exercises without rest. So maybe if you're training your upper body, you're going to start with some push-ups for a certain amount of sets and a certain amount of reps. Okay. But then what you're going to do is immediately before you have a chance to rest, you're going to go to another exercise that works the same muscle group, like maybe a bench press. So with circuit training, you're constantly going from exercise A to exercise B with no rest. The idea is you progress through certain sets and reps. You go on to the next exercise. You do the same thing, no rest. Then you go to the next exercise. That type of training tends to develop muscle endurance more than muscle power and muscle hypertrophy, which is muscle size. Body weight exercises, I'm not using weight here. I'm using my own body weight, like a push-up or a standing squat. All the weight that I'm using is the weight on my frame. I don't have any dumbbells. I don't have any barbells. I don't have any kettlebells. I don't have any bumper plates. All I'm doing is what my body can do in terms of its own weight. So a push-up is a body weight exercise. The squat, where you're just standing up and squatting down, is a body weight exercise. Next one is called ascending versus descending sets. Right? When you ascend, you're going up. If I have spiritual friends out there and you believe in a higher, form of existence, and we'll label it heaven, then what you always say is so-and-so is ascending up to heaven. So they are going up. If you are descending into the place that no one dare name, then you are going down into a place. So ascending, going up, descending, going down. So an ascending set is like you can see right here, where what I'm doing is my weight is getting more intense for each individual set. It starts out with like 225 for a squat, but I want to go up. So I'm going to do 5 repetitions. Then I'm going to take my break, check my Instagram feed. Then I'm going to bump it up to 275. I'm going to do that 5 times, take my rest. Oh, now I'm really feeling myself. I'm going to bump it up to 300 pounds. That's called an ascending set. The amount of weight that I'm lifting is going up. Contrast that with descending. Here, I'm still doing 5 reps, but now my weight is going down. I start at 300. Ooh, man, that's kind of tough. All right, I don't think I can do 300 anymore, so now I go down to 250. Then I go down to 200. So these are specific types of ways that I'll talk about in the future as to how you can construct a strength training routine. Right now, I'm happy if we can kind of understand ascending and descending sets. Last couple things here, single versus multi-joint. Our bodies have lots of joints in them. Joints are where muscles come together to produce movement, right? So if I have a single joint exercise, that's called an isolation move. So only one joint is moving, and it's moving in the direction. So this joint right here, my elbow, is the only joint that is moving in this biomechanical movement right here. This is called a single or isolation movement. Only one muscle, only one joint moving here. Okay, only one direction I can go right here. A compound movement is where multiple joints are moving. So a shoulder press is going to be a compound movement because I have a joint right here that's moving, and I also have a joint right here that's moving. In order to complete this biomechanical movement, 2 joints have to move. That's called a compound exercise. An isolation exercise, only one joint moving. Compound exercise, multiple joints moving. So if I have like a bench press and I'm doing that, that's a compound exercise. I got this moving, I got that moving. Okay, if I'm doing exercise for my triceps on the back of my arm, chances are that will be an isolation exercise because I only have this one joint. Hopefully you guys are following me there. Here's some other examples of compound versus isolations. We're not going to belabor this slide. Want to go ahead and put a bow on this bad boy here soon. But the idea is that you can kind of see how many joints are actually moving in that particular movement right here. You might not know what they all are, but the ones on the left are called compound because multiple joints are moving. The ones on the right are called isolations because only one joint is moving. So that's just kind of a visualization for you guys to maybe check out at a later point in time if you listen to the recording of this. Okay, the last kind of part of this that I wanted to do is I wanted to talk really quickly about some sample body weight exercises. All right, and again, I want you guys to hear me say that if you're interested in this subject matter, I would encourage you to go back and listen to the first 2 presentations that we have recorded, where I talk a little bit about the kind of the psychology of fitness. And then the last one, I start talking about how you can start to think about structuring the program. Here, I'm just trying to give people a kind of a window into the types of body weight exercises that we could incorporate into our program. But I want everybody to hear that at some point in time in the future, and if you can pay attention to presentations within the Science Center and the Academic Success Center, you can kind of see when this is going to be. We'll talk about specifically how we can put this routine together for you guys if you're interested in that. But here's just in my last slide or two, this is just kind of the idea of some body weight exercises that we can do. And you can kind of look at these and you can say, okay, are they single or are they multiple joint based on the pictures I see down here at the bottom? But all I kind of want to leave you guys here with is some example of some body weight exercises that maybe you can kind of conceptualize yourself doing and how they will attack or stress certain muscle groups. Let me go ahead and put kind of a bow on this. I didn't want to really get to these more advanced concepts right here. You can kind of look through this, but I'm going to talk more about this in the future. In fact, this particular edit, I didn't think I had this particular one in it. So I would kind of encourage you to, I mean, you can look at this one right here. We don't really need to belabor this, but basically this is a beginning body weight workout where you can progress through 6 different exercises, all right, that are body weight or using some kind of weight around you. And the idea here is that you progress through these different 6 exercises, then you take a rest, then you progress through all 6 of them again. What's that starting to sound like? Circuit training. Okay, so I'm doing these 6 exercises. I rest, I do them again. I rest, I do them again. All right, I do want to gloss over this last one. I'll make sure that when we edit this, that we actually don't have this one in here, just because I would like to kind of save this for later on when we start talking about more advanced concepts. If you want to kind of read that, and based on what I've talked about, if you're kind of vibing with it and you can kind of understand the numbers and the little reference symbols there, then by all means, this is called a split routine, where you're kind of splitting it into upper and lower body routines. But I'll talk about all that in the future, right, when we get into exercise prescription and exercise design. So what I want to do is I want to really quickly put a bow on this, because I went about 3 minutes over, and then I want to go ahead and hang out for a few minutes if you have any questions for me. What I wanted you all to get out of this was an appreciation for what strength training is, the kind of benefits that it does have physically as well as mentally. I wanted to introduce you to some concepts of how strength training works, and I want to introduce you guys to some terminologies that strength trainers use and have to understand when they are trying to design a strength training program. I think next Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, we have the same exact thing for more aerobically oriented athletes. So some aerobic concepts, some aerobic terms, and I hope to see you guys there with that. So with that, the ideas here that I presented, again, it's more on the sciencey side, but kind of what I'm hoping is that you guys got something out of this right here, and that this was something that you can kind of look at later on, and you can say, yeah, I mean, I understand this kind of conceptually, and then we'll be kind of good to go with that. So with that, I want to thank you guys for being here. Yeah, Thursday, September 5th at 7. That's going to be more of the aerobic side of the equation. This was more of the anaerobic side, right? An means without oxygen. So this is going to be more on that side. But like I said, I'll hang out for just a couple minutes if you guys have any questions. But I'm honored that you guys came to share some time with me. And I look forward to maybe you guys kind of coming back next week and then the next few weeks and just kind of building on knowledge with me. I think we have a raised hand. Go ahead, Samantha. Yeah, when we learn how to plan splits. That's going to be, let's see, I have the aerobic, I have a presentation on fit and smart goal developments, and this is what we have already kind of scheduled at the Science Center. Melissa, you can help me out with that. And then I have a quick presentation on the biomechanics, which is real nerd speak. And after that, my last presentation is going to be on putting all those different things together. So I think December-ish, I think that's kind of where we are in terms of planning. But I would just highly encourage you guys to kind of keep your eyes open for that. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Yeah, so October 7th is the FIT principle. But November is going to be biomechanics. And then December would be exercise testing or exercise prescription and design. So Samantha, that would be a really cool one to go to. That's where I kind of put all these things together and kind of come up with some templates for how people can kind of structure some stuff. Good question. And I hope to see you guys all there, by the way. Okay, anything else? All right. Again, thanks for attending, guys. Hope to see you at future presentations.